Many strange things have been reported to me about the metro in Mexico City. Stories of occurrences in its stations as they become deserted. Of voices, shadows, and visions. I suppose if ghosts exist, the metro would be a fitting place for them. Years ago, I had my own experience there, and it is perhaps the only supernatural event I have ever encountered. Over time, I dismissed my initial theory that it was an elaborate and macabre prank without any purpose. I did so when I learned of people who experienced very similar events. The following story takes place in 2010, shortly after I moved to Mexico City. A few months into my stay, a friend who would later become my girlfriend and with whom I now live, had the chance to visit me for a weekend. Her flight back home was at 1 in the morning on Monday, so Sunday was her last day to explore the city with me. We decided, initially as a joke but then with growing enthusiasm, to visit the famous Chapultepec Fair. Contrary to what we thought, it wasn't easy to get there. First, we innocently assumed we could walk from the entrance of Chapultepec Forest, where the now infamous Estela de Luz stands, but after asking around we found a form of public transport that eventually, albeit a bit late, got us there. The day was fun. We wandered until we were literally ushered out of the fair, still eating and chatting even when most of the attractions had long stopped operating. What happened here might be important or perhaps not, but I feel it's worth mentioning. We finished our meal on a bench, not in a dining area, and we weren't near the entrance. Rather, we were in the farthest corners of the fair. Although it wasn't very late, silence seemed to take over even the pathways adjacent to the fair. We were told we couldn't stay any longer, and as we headed towards the exit, someone spoke to us from the darkness of one of the tunnels. When we turned around, we thought we saw one of the actors from the haunted house still in costume, which made us run a bit, laughing nervously at what we assumed was a prank. However, the incident left us feeling uneasy and sensitive. It's strange and perhaps unrelated, or maybe it made us extremely perceptive to what was to come. You can decide for yourselves. We bought a soda and walked around the fair for a while. Nearby, there seemed to be some sort of special event, so we decided to sit there to pass the time. After all, my friend had her small backpack with her from the trip. It would have been a waste of time to go back home, so we decided to wait until it was time to head to the airport. We were so engrossed in our conversation that before we knew it, it was past 11 p.m., and we rushed to the Constituentes metro station. Those familiar with the route from the Chapultepec Fair to this station know it's not the most pleasant at that hour, but we made it without any issues. For those unfamiliar, I'll explain a bit. Constituentes connects with Tacubaya, which is just the second station after Observatorio, where the pink line, the oldest in the system, begins. We had to cross the city via that line to its end at Pantatlan, then transfer 2 stations to finally reach the airport. We encountered some people on the train to Tacubaya. Once there, due to the time, day, and direction we were headed, the station seemed deserted. Tacubaya is a very deep station, which always posed a problem for me as someone who dislikes the feeling of being under tons of earth. Only 2 young people were on the platform heading to Pantatlan at the other end, near the last car. We waited for the first cars. When the train arrived, we boarded an empty car. As we sat down, I felt a slight chill. We talked about it. We had been a bit on edge since the appearance of the young man at the fair. Now, the feeling that something was about to happen was growing more intense. I glanced toward the other end of the car. A woman was smiling at us, showing her teeth, with expressionless eyes but clearly looking in our direction. I didn't know what to do. I stayed silent and looked at the floor. My friend managed to say good evening, but the woman did not respond. She was just there, smiling, motionless. We reached the next station, Juanacatlan, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the woman slowly stand up and get off. Because the dress or skirt she was wearing was long, her feet didn't show as she walked, which made it even more eerie. When the train doors closed and we moved on, we burst into nervous laughter, a mix of relief and bewilderment. Our laughter faded when at the next station, Chapultepec, the woman got back on the train just before the doors closed. This time she sat almost in the middle of the car, much closer to us. My friend suggested we change cars at the next station, and I nodded in agreement. When we arrived at Sevilla, we stood up, and so did she, all 3 of us frozen for a moment. I squeezed my friend's hand and pulled her back to sit down. At that moment, I decided I wasn't going to fall for this woman's prank or game, thinking deep down that it might be the same person who tried to scare us at the fair hours earlier. she also sat down one seat ahead. When the doors closed again, there wasn't much distance between us. We reached Metro Insurgentes and there were some people on the platform. I thanked God as if it were a blessing when an elderly woman and some kids got on. There were still 14 stations to go to reach Pantetlan, and I didn't think I could endure the journey like that. We passed the Cuauhtémoc and Balderas stations without incident. Then at Isabel La Católica 2 of the kids got off, and now there were only 5 of us in the car. The smiling woman, who now seemed to hide her smile by looking at the floor but with her eyes still fixed on us. The elderly woman, a kid, and the 2 of us. The kid got off at Pino Suarez and I felt even more nervous. Half of the journey was still ahead, and now I also felt responsible for the lady who had made the mistake of boarding the same car as us. She sat there, one seat away from us, with her back to the woman who was now looking at us again with a smile. I felt tempted to ask her to join us to change cars, but it would have been impossible to explain. My friend understood what was happening, that we couldn't let her go, but we also couldn't say anything, so she stopped insisting on changing cars. Merced. Candelaria, San Lazaro. The stations went by and no one got on, and without noticing, the woman moved a little closer with each station change. I prayed to heaven that the power wouldn't go out, that the train wouldn't stall in the tunnels as had happened to me recently. We passed Moctezuma and Balbuena, and at the next station Boulevard Porta Aéreo. Pale, standing by the door, she watched us both with a gaze that seemed to say, "I'm sorry," though I wasn't sure if she was aware of what was happening. I didn't know if she was somehow conscious that the 3 of us were involved and that she had just betrayed us. And now we were alone again. Next to that thing, that strange woman we couldn't look at directly. It's very odd, I don't clearly remember her face because we never dared to look at her closely, but I do recall her wide-open eyes and her very white smile in my memories. It's as if the rest of her face was just a completely empty blackness. And there she was, standing about 3 meters away from us. We still had 2 more stations to go and the next one would be Pantetlan. My friend pulled me just in time before the doors closed. We got off and barely managed to board the adjacent car. Inside there were 2 or 3 people and 2 more boarded at the Zaragoza station. During that last part of the journey at the final station, we saw the woman standing in the center of the adjacent, empty car, watching us. When the doors opened, we hurried and rushed towards the connection with the yellow line. The 2 stations towards the airport were calm, although we couldn't talk much. At the airport, with some time to spare, we had one last coffee. I know deep down she invited me so that it would be midnight, giving me an excuse not to have to return home by metro on that line. It took me a few months to ride it again. I never did it alone at that hour. A year or a year and a half later, after we became a couple, we moved in together. Today we live in San Jose del Cabo in Baja California, sir. We no longer talk about what happened and are happy in this small city. There is no metro. We have a car, and although we occasionally take public transport, it's nothing like the metro. Sometimes, when we visit Mexico City, we joke about it, but we never take the pink line. I don't think I could do it even now. I can't say what happened that night in 2010. I don't know if it was a ghost, a person playing a cruel prank, or something else entirely. But I do know that it was real and it left a lasting impression on both of us. It's a story we'll never forget, even if we rarely speak of it.